Good day, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the first webinar of this academic year, featuring Jean-Thomas Martelly, Head Researcher at the Centre de Sciences Humaines in New Delhi, hosted by Professor Ralph Schroeder of the OII. Today, they will be discussing the computational analysis of Modi's Twitter and social media uses. A little housekeeping. We are fortunate to have a varied audience with a wide range of views, and we request that the opinions of others are respected in this space. For your awareness, this event is being recorded and will be posted on our website following the event. You can pose any question using the Q&A tab at any time, and these will be answered towards the end of the talk. Questions will be visible to all attendees and can be upvoted and commented upon, and we will endeavour to follow up on any unanswered queries. Please allow me to introduce Ralph Schroeder and Jean-Thomas Martelly.
Hello, and welcome to this first OII seminar of the term. I'm really pleased that Jean-Thomas can join us. He's been introduced already as working in Delhi, and I'm going to do equally badly or poorly in saying Centre de Sciences Humaines. Jean-Thomas is a student of Indian politics and has written really exciting work, which some of you will be familiar with, about student politics and about Modi's populism and so on. I will not take up any further time with the introduction, except to say that I've seen him present his work on Modi and social media before, and he has an unbelievably rich data set, and this will enable him to analyze populism in India, I think, in an unparalleled way. So without further ado, Jean-Thomas, please.
Thank you, Professor Schroeder, for your very kind introduction, and of course I would like to thank the Oxford Internet Institute for this invitation today. This talk is part of a series, in fact, three standalone talks that engage with populism in South Asia and in India in particular. This is the third and last session, but don't worry, it has its coherent logic. 2 days ago, I spoke on left populism in India, and the way populism can be used as a strategy of autonomization by new political actors emerging and building a political career. Yesterday, I started talking about populism in power, as opposed to populism as a tool to conquer it. I looked at the transformation of the anti-elitist discourse into a more explicit one by using this speech and text analysis that we are going to discuss today. And so today we are going to examine more the social media aspect of it, the more digital politics aspect, and you will see it will connect with the other bits. Also, this is part of 4 papers in preparation, but one in particular, and that I'm co-authoring with a brilliant student called Vihan Jumle. So some of these graphs I will point have been generated by him, so I wanted to acknowledge him. Right, so I will share my screen. Hopefully it will work so that you can see my PowerPoint. Right. Okay. Here we go. So, of course, some of you are very familiar with the topic of populism at a global scale, but it's still important to have it in mind that the marketization and mediatization of political communication around the world has suspected to have contributed tremendously to the rise of populism globally. And the emergence of populist consultants as well as populist leaders have taken a significant role in this rise of populism. And of course, as I was just mentioning, there is clear evidence that we have to distinguish populism as a tool to conquer and populism as a tool to rule, and the two are very different. And we're going to focus today on populism in power, because we're going to look at the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's speeches. To give you an extremely quick overview of the case of populism in India, we have the kind of background check. What we face in India is the emergence of a new party system in which the leading party, the BJP, is winning the national election after national election, even is losing at more regional levels. And there's a progressive turn from a form of populism that promotes the majority community, which is the Hindu community. That is more, this process is more and more open and is more and more naked. So we are moving from a de facto majoritarianism to a de jure majoritarianism. And of course, the subalternization of the Hindutva, the Hindu nationalist movement, and Narendra Modi is a proponent of it, has also been enabled by Modi's populist discourse, which we're going to examine. There is plenty of evidence, and I will not insist on it, that there has been a populist turn in India, not only by Narendra Modi, but also by increasingly more and more political figures. So we can see a form of spillover of populist attitudes. Beyond the national level, even at state level, with chief ministers, for instance, like Mamata Banerjee or Arvind Kejriwal in Delhi and in West Bengal. What I'm going to do today is advance three overlapping arguments, which I would be really happy to discuss further. First, I will suggest, on the basis of this data set that I'm going to introduce, that Modi uses platforms, online platforms such as Twitter, in a quite surprising way that is unexpected when taking the literature on populism at a global stage. That in fact, he uses a platform like Twitter in a least populist way, as opposed to other of his speeches and other of his mediums and media use that are much more populist. And we will compare the Twitter use with another medium, which is the radio. This leads us to kind of propose that maybe populism on social media might be less dependent on the media itself, on the medium itself, and more dependent on the actual audience that lays beyond that social media. And considering the variability of the populist communication by Modi, we're also going to put some question marks on the existing ideational theory of populism that sees it as an idea rather than a strategy. And we're going to suggest that taking into account populist strategies is necessary, not necessarily contradictory, but necessary in the process of understanding populist practices. Right. I'll go quickly on the literature, because I'm sure there's plenty of expertise already in the audience. There are clear evidence that social media is in a way helping at least a certain amount of populists around the world by enabling them to circumvent traditional media platforms. And also by introducing a more direct, a more unmediated form of communication between the people and the leader, with a gradual decline of intermediary structures such as political parties. There are a list of arguments which you can see here, which I'm not going to insist on, but feel free to come back to that in the discussion. Twitter in particular is not necessarily believed to be the most populist platform, but there are certain studies that show that indeed in certain countries, in certain places, Twitter helps populists because it is a unidirectional broadcasting platform favoring algorithmically enhanced virality. It was a difficult one, but I managed. Again, this argument of horizontality that enables adversarial rhetoric, has low operating costs, ease of access, enables small and then unambiguous and simplistic messages to the audience, and creates echo chambers to have a better penetration of populist ideas, enables the fake news, and invisibilize oppositions through a phenomenon of harassment, of name shaming, trolling, strategic distraction, etc., etc. Right. This is already an interpretation, but my sense of the literature is that there is a strong continuation hypothesis. Continuation hypothesis kind of suggests that, well, if you look at social media platforms, you can talk about populism in general. If you spot populism on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, or other platforms, you can label and paint a populist or a populist movement in the way you want, because Twitter or Facebook would reinforce the populist narrative of the leader, and it will complement in a way an otherwise populist approach, right? We are going to suggest, I'm going to suggest that this continuation model is a little limited in the case that we're going to study, because we are going to witness a quite advanced form of specialization in terms of topics, in terms of attitude, in terms of style. And this will also force us to try to integrate something more than the explicit form of anti-elitism and people-centrism. We're going to try to grasp something beyond that. We're going to try to integrate those stylistic postures which has markers in the language. We're going to try to integrate that in the analysis. So by doing so, we are going to somehow temporarily renounce to do a cross-country analysis and focus more on an intra-country analysis to see the variation within one speaker, in that case Modi, but also place it within a larger spectrum of political debate within the field of politics, if you want, of a particular country, in the case India. And by doing so, we are going to try to operationalize things that are usually seen as unoperationalizable, such as charisma, for instance. Right. Twitter in India is still a medium that is not used by everyone. Around 12% of the users in India are using Twitter, as opposed to 30% for Facebook, 30% for WhatsApp, and 30% for YouTube around. It is also tilted towards upper class and educated people. Only 5% of those who reach matriculation. Matriculation is 10 standard. Access Twitter. And also, as soon as we exit the youth kind of population, we can see that the users of Twitter are very low. So it's a pretty much a urban phenomenon also, and it it's also due to the fact that the ownership of a smartphone is still not a very widespread phenomenon, though it has been growing extensively in the past 5 years. So we can label Twitter an elite, a pretty much elite and professionalized medium as compared to YouTube, for instance. Right. So Modi on Twitter, there are several studies. There has been a transformation of the language of Modi over the years. And we're not going to discuss that too much, but I just want to signal it from someone who advocates development, tech-savvy individuals that speaks the language of modernity and development, to someone that we'll see that is much more tilted toward the divine and the spiritual, which will fuel his populist narrative, as we're going to see. Banal, mostly positive message, create the buzz, feel good, technology oriented, governance, development, pride, sport, anniversaries. We are going to come back to that very soon. High-tech populism. Some might even term that selfie nationalism because he likes to take selfies very much, though he has stopped in the past 2-3 years. So we can see here that Modi has used the Twitter quite a lot. Since the beginning, he claims to be the leader or second leader who has the most followers. So he has been investing quite a bit on Twitter. Right, here is a snippet of a version of the corpus. There is a more updated version of it, but for the sake of today, we're going to stick to that. So what is the idea behind it? It's to have an overview of speeches, not only across political actors, and in this case, prime ministers. If you'll just look at the 11 prime minister here, starting from Jawaharlal Nehru to Narendra Modi. You have historical figures, but you also have debates in parliament, ministerial answer in parliament. You have a set of administrative documents. Here you can see union budgets, 5 years plan, economic survey, the Reserve Bank of India speeches, financial statement, etc. And you also have discourse by gurus. We'll see this will be quite instrumental to our analysis. So there are around 28 speakers. They are broken down by the medium. You can see here. In the case of Modi, we have seven mediums. In his interviews, his Man Ki Baats, which are his monthly radio shows, his independence speeches, and Republic Day speeches, are more general speeches, his statements who are made without audience, and his tweets, right? And the same for other type of locutors. So you have a sense here that is more accurate. Okay, so before we move to the tweets of Modi, maybe you want to have a more broader picture of Modi populism and what is entailed. It's a quite tricky populism, in fact. If you just look at, for instance, the team populism survey on populists, Modi and Bolsonaro are classified as little or no populist at all. So why is that happening? Is because populism of Modi, in particular populists in power, display a form of anti-elitism that is more difficult to capture. So in order to have a sense of it, develop a conceptual framework, which will come back in the conclusion, which I called mimetic rapport between the populace and the people. Mimesis will be here a form of imitation of the people, from not only from a discursive approach, but also from a bodily approach of the flaunting of the law, a sociological approach of the people through imitating their quote unquote lowly manners, their simple manners, which I wanted to capture. So to capture these, I created a dictionary that tries to measure three components you can see here, which are disintermediation, intimacy, and simplicity. They are parameters that proxy populism in a positive and a direct relationship and an inverse relationship. And I compared that to existing dictionaries that try to measure populism. And here at the basis, you have 36 or 34, I forgot, indicators that are taken from existing, most of them are taken from existing dictionaries, one of them being Luke, which would test psychological profiles. So these are used as a base to derive more contextual vocabulary related to those indicators. We run collocations, which is a form of co-occurrence, to generate words that are much more contextual. Here I'm giving you an example of the theme of religion, which is classified as a form of intimacy, to talk about the everyday the everyday spiritual issue and devotional issues. So there's a category in the dictionary. We run collocation, so to generate vocabulary on religion that is much more Indian centric for the use of the analysis, and we take those words that are related, of course, to the base seeds words, but they also have a positive correlation with a positive chi-square. Right. And from that, we just do a ratio of populist prone and populist averse features. And you can see here, I'll go quickly because we want to go to the Twitter specific aspect, but you can see here that Modi comes clearly above the 10 other prime minister, which are here on the left. Here are the administrative document that has spoken. So these are the Reserve Bank of India speeches, and the budget speeches were given annually by the Minister of Finance. As compared to here, the guru, in some instance, we can see that Modi fares almost equally to gurus. In that case, we have taken a particular kind of gurus. I'm happy to discuss that, but what we call hyper gurus or new wave gurus, which have particular features. I'm happy to discuss. So we have Sadhguru, Ravi Shankar, Baba Ramdev, and BK Shivani. We're in the process of adding a few more in the database. Right. So this is this puzzling relationship that has not been discussed really much and has that goes beyond words also. This relationship is further confirmed by looking at by just taking a cosine analysis. It's just we turn words into vectors from randomly sampled documents, and those vectors take into account context, and we compute similarity with this. So you can see here on the top left that when you ask what is the most similar document, in this case mediums of a speaker to Modi Man's ki Baat on the top left, you can see three other Modis, his interviews, and his Independence Day speeches. But just right after that, in the red, you have two gurus, Sadhguru and Ravi Shankar. So for the naive algorithm, what is most similar to a Man Ki Baat, what is most similar to a Modi's radio show is the speech of a guru. So this is quite puzzling. If you take the reverse, it also work. If you look at what is most similar to Ravi Shankar, you can see that the third in line is the Man Ki Baats of Modi. And if you look at Ramdev, what is most similar to Ramdev, you have two Modis in the top 5, just along with gurus. Basically, four gurus and 3 gurus, sorry, and 2 Modis. Right. Now, in order to further understand what is the contribution to this of his particular discussion on his Twitter use, we perform a correspondence analysis, which is a kind of crosstab. It's not too much more complicated than that, with a frequency distribution of 2 variables, in this case Modi's address formats and Modi's words. I mean, this one has all the corpus in it, so not only Modi but also other locators. You can see it draws a certain kind of field of Indian politics, which you can think in your own country how it would translate. But there are 2 poles that are extremely interesting to notice. On the left here are all the lettering of the administrative documents, right? With words such as policy, financial, rate, market development, system, government, under central states, given, right? The language of federalism and a language of technocracy. On the right here, B, K, J, and even here GA or Gandhi, you have gurus, and in fact Gandhi can also be considered as a guru. You have all the gurus. How do they speak? They say they use relational words: I, you, me, want, know, life, angry, beautiful, body, child, color, emotional, energy, feel, fantastic, happiness, heal, inside, nature, love, nice, parent, pure, scar, simple, vibration, yoga, wonderful. So you can see here you have a much more emotional, a much more disintermediated language that try to appeal for gurus for maybe commercial purposes or to develop their following. And for Modi is to show himself as close as possible to the people. Here I have highlighted Modi addresses, and you can see here that they tilt towards the guru, as we have shown in the previous slide. And you see here the outlier MW, which are Modi's tweets. See here there is material to think that Modi's tweets are a little bit different. And are they populist? We're going to see. We're going to see just now. Here is also, I don't know to which extent you can see because of my box, but here on the right you have tweets. Right. So here are the computer specific scores for the words. In that case, lemma dictionary entries of words that are more specific to tweets, Modi tweets, as compared to other Modi type of addresses. Specific scores are just like weighted frequencies. This is a way of measuring significance. And you see here on the left hand side the words that are most specific to tweets as compared to other things. Do you see anything populist here? Well, we're going to see that not too much. We can see greeting, congratulations, birthday wishes, condolences. We can see pride, interaction with other global leaders, etc., etc. So we are a little puzzled. We said it doesn't really look like the rest. In particular, his Monkey Bats. Okay, so here are the. However, of course, there's an overall coherence. For instance, topic of nationalism. That, for instance, Professor Schroeder has discussed in few places on other platforms such as TikTok in India. A phenomenon of spectator sport militarism, in which you are constantly, Modi is constantly asking individuals to cheer on performance of military actions, but they are mixed with entertainment, in that case sport. You can see what is specific in tweets are very much, you can see here nation winning bronze accomplishments, Asian games in that case, etc., etc. But you see it mixed with other words. This is in particular case of co-occurrence of the word pride, what is proud of on Twitter. And you can see here fortitude, rapid, surgical strike. You can see Javan, which is the military, soldier. And you can see strikes on the bottom right. So you can see this, that this is not too much specific of tweets. There is, of course, an overall coherence of the nationalistic attitude of Modi. In that case, it can be argued that it can be populist also. Right. So here is a hierarchical clustering of Modi's words that are most recurrent. This is some kind of topic modeling. So we just look at set of words that tend to co-occur together. It's just a slight different method. I'm happy to discuss in the discussion. So here I have printed the 8 topics, if you want, or classes that have been generated by the algorithm. I've circled in red those who are specific to tweets, not exactly specific in which tweets contribute the most. It means that this vocabulary is found much more in his tweets. You can see his class 6 and 5, the blue and the violet. So you have a huge contribution. And you can see here, is there anything populist? I mean, you're open to differ, but you have a lot of, in fact, mediated international collaboration. You see class 6, president, tank, meet, address, welcome, bilateral. You cannot do less populist than that. Excellency, interact, friendship, cooperation, delegation, etc., etc. So we can see here, and on the class number 5, you have something that is quite ceremonial, but also congratulatory. A lot of anniversary, a lot of things again related to sport, to birthday, to tribute, etc. Right. So now, if we just relocate these tweets, as compared to other medium, and we rerun the same kind of analysis I just introduced before, that try to measure in absolute number the ratio of populism in the form of intimacy, simplicity, and disintermediation. You can see here it goes the one is disintermediation. Here is disintermediation. Here is simplicity, and here is intimacy. And here is a sentiment analysis. And again, once again, Modi is in orange. You can see here the one I circle in red, which are his Man Ki Baat, his speeches in general, and the speeches are always at the top. Right, when it is intimacy, simplicity, and disintermediation. In that way, they look like very much guru, which are in red. Again, you can see here, and you can see here, and you can see here. Right. It differs for the sentiment analysis because gurus are talking about a lot about family problems, how to run a good life. They are crisis managers, so the language is much more negative, and because it directly assesses with everyday troubles. What you see in dark circle are his tweets and his statements. You can see that almost always you have lower indication of populism if you take these three indicators. Here, here, and here. So you can see that, well, it looks like he's using Twitter for populist issues. Here is just, I will go quickly, of one of the aspects of his use of Twitter is to emphasize a lot on national heroes and national figures at the cost of his own ideological coherence. So like he diverts symbols that are traditionally opposed to his political family, the Hindutva. He's praising Gandhi, for instance, like very much. You can see here in his tweets, he's overusing references of figures such as Gandhi as compared to, for instance, the rest of his speeches. Right. So we can see this is very striking. So that's the only venturing outside of India. I would like to thank Vihang for generating this. I didn't do it myself. You can see here the difference between Trump as a very acrimonious and aggressive form of anti-elitism, in this case against the media, the traditional media he hates like anything. And Modi doesn't hate anything, he praises everything, no problem. Topic number one of Trump on the left-hand side, you can see fake, you can see witch, you can see wrong, you can see media, of course, you can see corrupt, etc., etc. You don't find such explicit aggression against elites in Modi, right? He talks about farmers again, against about pride, bilateral cooperation, etc., etc. in his tweets, right? So here are examples of the tweets that on the one side are they pick the people in conflict against someone, and tweets mentioning the people in which there is no such aggression. Green is Modi and red is Trump. What he does also, and I will be really quick, is he likes to talk about things that are supposed to be not politically charged, but in fact they are. He's talking about festivals a lot. And even if he mentioned, we'll see in the next slide, the other form of festivals, he talks a lot about Hindu festivals. So through a positive, engaging language of celebration, of course, any kind of festival, Diwali, Navratri, Pujo, I mean, so many of them, there are countless of them. You can see that he likes to talk about that a lot, but also they carry a form of identity marker of a group affiliation that is particularly Hindu. So in the excuse of talking about something happy, you also bring a certain Hindu identity to it. The same by dragging Gandhi, extracting everything controversial about his fight against communal violence and anti-Muslim activities, removing all this and using Gandhi as a brand figure of Hinduism, and again as a guru. Right, so here you have examples of how he celebrates those festivals. Let you read quickly. Right. So all in all, now we look at, let's say, whether this idea that tweets are tilting more towards the populist side of Modi or more towards the non-populist side of him. We can see here I have computed using doc2vec cosine similarities. Again, these are numeric vectors, just taking into account the neighboring words to look at, in this case, how a particular speaker and particular medium use is compared to another one. On the right side, I put speakers and mediums that tend to be more technocratic, such as Vajpayee. Manmohan Singh was an economist, trained in Oxford, and session of the Lok Sabha, I mean the lower house of the parliament, which are also very often, especially written questions, they're very technical and they're very specific. Reports of the Reserve Bank of India, you can imagine how technocratic that can be. Of course, it's monetary policy, etc. Economic surveys, which are also technical in nature. So this is on the right side. On the left side, you have somehow, and of course it's open to debates, but okay, overall actors that seem to be having more populist attributes. We have Sadhguru, Shivani, I mean the gurus we mentioned before, and Gandhi, and other populists who believe so populists of the Indian history. Agrarian leader Chandrasekhar on the top left side, and of course Indira Gandhi, who's supposed to be the first Indian populist, if you want. You can see that tweets looks like more Vajpayee, Manmohan Singh, parliamentary debates. Though it's not extremely striking, it is there. When you can see the black line, which are the tweets, are especially on the top right corner, you can see that they beat older form or other forms of Modi speeches, Modi addresses, including his speeches. So we can see here we have clear evidence. I think that Modi doesn't use the platform in a populist way. So now that we have come to that kind of conclusion, here are some examples again of this this non-populist use of the platform. We have to ask ourselves why and how. I mean, it should now be kind of clear that he specializes very much. He uses mediums only for a particular specific purpose. So I'm bringing these three arguments based on the interpretation of this. Modi does not use Twitter to bypass traditional media. He uses to engage with a distinctively cosmopolitan audience, traditionally his enemies. When he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, he will call the Congress as a Delhi Sultanate. So you conflate two types of elitism: dynastic elitism, and of course a coloration as the outsider, so a nativist argument. These are not our people. Sonia Gandhi being half Italian, these are outsiders by nationality, outsiders in terms of the fact that they are sons and daughters of rulers, and of course they live in Delhi and they live a lavish life, etc. Right. So these and of course, there are other studies that show that Modi uses Twitter to garner support, in particular support of his own troll army that then silence through attacks anyone who wants to be critical on the platform. So it is more a broadcasting platform to other populist medium. It calls people to listen to Monkey Bats. He say, come and listen to Monkey Bats, but it doesn't use the language of Monkey Bats in his tweets. Right, so now that we know that, then what is exactly happening when we relate that to the more general discussion on social media and populism? Well, kind of suggests that maybe the media itself, the structure of the media, its horizontality, as we said in introduction, maybe is not the major factor that push populists to use it. They use a populist medium if the audience behind it is a plebeian, and hence the demotic discourse of populism can work. The case of Modi, since Twitter is a rather, as we have seen, an elite platform, is there a point to be populist on this? No. Better be too populist on All India Radio, which is the national owned radio program, radio channel that can access anyone, including those who don't have a smartphone, those who don't use Twitter, those who live in rural areas, as we have seen. So here we call, the argument would be to call to more attention to the audience beyond the medium rather than the medium itself. Right. And we can see that there are other examples that others have used. I mean, of course, Berlusconi have used the Mediaset, his television channel to be populist on it. Hugo Chavez, his radio show Allo Presidente. And there are other examples of all media, if you want, being the most populist, surprisingly, as opposed to social media, right? And finally, the finding should make us more careful about the context in which the populist communication happened. Right, cross-country comparison should be able to contextualize the meaning of the language in order to adjust to the way populism vernacularized, how they adapt a particular condition. In the case of Modi, we can say that this populism of intimacy and connect has to take from another realm than politics. He has to take from the realm of the saintly, from the one of the advisory, from the one of Vishwas, trust, of the one of the Pracharak, the leader in traditional RSS in RSS shakas, the Guru Shiksha Parampara, the culture of the Guru and the disciple, which is really much present in not only in politics but beyond in India, is emulated by a Modi who then escape the electoral and the political critique. He's beyond, he's away, and when there are millions of people dying in India because of COVID, it's not his fault. He's beyond all this, right? How to blame a guru? Is it possible to blame a guru? No, it is not. So you can see here that without understanding those dynamics, we can maybe miss the point and say, okay, maybe he's explicitly not attacking established elite, so maybe he's not populist. So that will be the result of a maybe quick and naive cross-country comparison. But looking more closely, you can see, but in fact, he is a master populist. So it calls to have maybe a more contextualized cross-country comparisons, which are more attentive to the way we measure populism. On that note, I overstepped by two minutes. I would be extremely happy to have a question from the audience. And comments by Ralph.
Jean-Thomas, thanks so much. I'm sure you've got some virtual claps as well. That was really amazing, because you have more exhaustively covered not only Modi's tweets, but also compared his various channels with other sources of political discourse and also with other ways in which Modi reaches his audience. We have a whole series of questions already. Let me just repeat them, and I will read them out, and we can take them in turn. So first of all, someone is asking, what is the time frame and what is the rough scale of these tweets, please?
Right. So the scale is, I mean, it starts from 1888, the first text, but is restricted to Gandhi and then later to Ambedkar. So late 19th century, we have quite little, and then it runs till 2020. I'm in the process of updating that to 2021. Of course, it is the more you get to the present time, the more material you can find. So the text from early from pre-independence, for instance, are not too many. In fact, I will not share the screen again, but you can see in slide 2 or 3 the distribution, if you want, of this material. The exact amount of tweets right now, I don't remember. Roughly, I think 30,000 or a little bit more than 30,000. I can.
It's exhaustive, right? I mean, you can capture all his tweets practically, on at least that are associated with his account.
Yeah, it's not difficult. Also, it's easy to update it. I mean, there is no lack of tweet. Of course, if you compare it to everything else, I mean, there are not that much material on tweets, but it is really easy using contrastive approaches to make comparison with subcorpuses that are not that large. There is no methodologically, there is no problem, Lisa, that I know of.
That's great. Thanks. So let's move on to the next question. I have 2 questions here from Tanvi, and she asks, one is about the gurus and whether the popularity of Modi can be correlated with that of gurus. And the second, and she also, as part of that question, asks whether they have relationships with Modi, these gurus. And her second question is about the government, which is both at the state and federal level, the biggest sponsor for mainstream media. So the American media is comparatively less dependent on government funding. So that would suggest, I think, that there's some kind of relationship there with how you showed, I guess, American populism versus Indian populism. I guess it's more of a comment about the government funding of media, but the other one is about popularity of gurus being correlated somehow with Modi and their relationship.
Definitely. There are many relationships between gurus and the political movement that Modi is somehow the political head of it, right? There are many connections. So, for instance, they both have a nationalist language. There is Baba Ramdev define himself as Rashtra Guru, the country guru, the nationalist guru. So this is the first kind of common point. Second point, in terms of style, they all have to, in order to thrive, to have a very personalistic connection and a very personalized connection with the audience in the way new gurus, or like as Jacob Kopperman mention hypergurus. Those hypergurus thrive on a mediatized connection that plays as if there was a kind of close and intimate relationship between the two. From the point of view of ideology, of course, they developed this idea of the primacy of the Hindu Rashtra at the various levels. Some are explicit about it, some are less. Cosmopolitan gurus such as Ravi Shankar is a little bit more careful considering the wide audience he has outside of India. Some are less cosmopolitan, such as Baba Ramdev and others, and they are much more explicit about the kind of symbol they want to flaunt. Yoga, meditation, things that Modi talks about all the time. So you can see here this form of relationship, and there's an additional one, which is a complete direct relationship of gurus such as Ramdev openly calling to vote for Modi. In fact, before, when it was Congress time, Baba Ramdev was supportive of Congress. Then when he saw that things were changing, he had already built his empire and he wanted to save it. He switched to BJP and now is one of the big promoter of Modi. He had even bought a TV that is devotional TV that practice yoga on that is Ashtra TV. It's complete pro BJP. It's completely promoted. So the overlap are so many, both in terms of style, but also in terms of content and ideology. Just on your comment on the reliance of media or on public funding and in fact public advertisement, they're completely correct. It is more the case of newspaper though, because newspaper are very cheap in India, as you know, because in fact it's in a subsidized form. It runs on government advertisement. In fact, I have a friend that had to in Madhya Pradesh who had to close his newspaper because the government turned against him and said, "We'll not give you advertisement anymore." So that you're correct that the mainstream media is so pro-Modi because also financially it depends on it. Less for TV though, but for print media, it's definitely the case.
Interesting. And I think you've opened up a whole new direction of research with focusing on guru speeches. I mean, I think that is novel in this area in populism studies generally. But let's jump to the next question. To what extent did Modi attack his opponents or political rivals on Twitter? And mostly on what issue, if any?
Right. So there was the early phase. Modi started tweeting around 2012. Exactly, I forgot, but 2012 for sure. So you can see that first he was really critical against the Congress because he was seeking a third re-election in the state of Gujarat. So he was very much critical of the establishment that he accused of inaction, of economic slumpiness, and it was really much a more traditional populist in that sense of attacking directly elites, using Twitter also for it. Also to present himself as someone somewhat globalist as opposed to cosmopolitan, so someone of the world, but not mixing with the values of abroad and the West, but technologically savvy to portray himself as a man of the world without assimilating. So in that sense, he was attacking few people. Now it would be interesting to do a more diachronic analysis of the tweet, which I have not done yet, to see whether the direct attacks have lower over time. But yes, the campaign speeches are the most directly vehement against opposition, against the Congress, right? The way he wants to portray himself as Iranic, never entering into conflict, is also visible in the way that the data he puts online is structured. So I have to struggle to find campaign speeches because he doesn't want to put it online. So we have to dig, we have to take media clippings, we have to translate that ourselves. Sometimes they are, but they aren't translated. So we have to translate that from Hindi and sometimes from Gujarati, from the older ones. So definitely there is an attack, and there is a form of aggression against opposition. but it's more and more subtle, and it tries also to hide it as much as possible, and it does it only in specific occasion, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks before election, or even shorter than that. You just do a lot of rallies, and there it can be more aggressive. Yes.
Excellent. Another question here is about, I mean, what kind of research agendas this leads to. So someone asks, what social media platforms beyond Twitter would you suggest to perform cross-platform investigations, especially as Facebook and YouTube APIs are very limited?
Well, this is a big question. We have started with few others to try to look at the way it communicates on Facebook, more specifically on the way his party is doing advertisement on Facebook. One of the way is that Facebook ask political campaigners or political agencies to label their posts as political when they post it. Of course, almost none of them do it, but the few that do could help us train a model to identify political advertisement, which will help us see the way Modi delegates the more aggressive part to others without putting his name or without putting, explicitly. Another thing that I'm doing is that Professor Ralph Schroeder knows about it, is to look at the way BJP-sponsored channels are relaying the Modi discourse in a much more aggressive way. They are taking the Modi discourse and reading the subtext and making it much more explicit in terms of aggression against minorities. Of course, Republic TV is one of examples, but there are others. So we are looking at the way this narrative translates on more traditional channels. So that are the kind of things that are in the pipeline, but yet uncompleted and unfinished.
Excellent, thank you. And the next question here is related, which is the language that Modi uses on Twitter different from other social media platforms? I mean, you mentioned that in passing on a number of occasions, but maybe have you looked into that? How the language differs between the platforms?
Yeah, one of the issue is that some of the content is just duplicated, and some of the content of Modi is just a link that brings him to something else, either his speech or something that it does on or his monkey bat on another platform. So there's a lot of duplicate here, and as far as I know, there is not too much of personal tailoring of his discourse on a platform like Facebook. What it does, however, in that it crosses the boundaries between social media platform, is that it will link a more traditional medium with a social media platform. So, for instance, on Amazon Prime, he has a show that is almost the same, the replica, than his Monkey Band, but on a televisual format, but of course with a lot of interaction of YouTube and on other platform with a lot of comments. So it becomes difficult to trace the specificity within the social media realm, although there is scope to search more and to look at that more carefully and more closely.
Great, thank you. And the next question from Yusra Khan is, 60% of Modi's Twitter following is fake. Do you think it has any bearing on his engagement, or is that immaterial when it comes to his kind of social media hype? the follower account may not be directly related to the overall popularity, maybe.
There are a lot of fake users, of course, but fake users are more there to attack others rather than support Modi. There was an anonymous report on the way before every election there is a upsurge of fake accounts, of accounts who don't have a real name users and are not related to a particular person. It's a platform called Urban Nazi, but the study is quite solid. So there is definitely a use of this fake account, but I don't think they are there to congratulate Narendra Modi. I mean, only marginally. They're there to attack. They're there to attack anyone who tries to speak up, to say something. They're there for trolling rather than enhancing Modi popularity. I guess that Modi's popularity lays much beyond the platform Twitter. But of course, I mean, there must be some gain that he's getting from this fake account. Maybe Amok Sharma will be knowing much more about that, and the troll army and the individualization of this troll army. I remember one of his talk. He was discussing that this fake account, I mean, people who create a lot of fake accounts and in order to troll and bash are becoming more and more autonomous. They are not necessarily completely in the hand of the BJP. And when BJP start to be too mild on Muslims or something like this, they start to be upset and to troll back the BJP for their mild behavior. So there's a complex relationship here which I've not looked at. I must admit.
Thanks. There are more questions, but a very quick one. Is this research online?
Yes.
You post some of your papers on SSRN, I think.
Yeah. And I put some preprint on my website. If you just type my name, you'll find.
Right. And Subir Sinha has a question here, although they have to go. Doesn't Modi use Twitter primarily to separate himself from his more overtly Hindu past, which also involved hate speech? Are gurus not in a way vehicles of consolidating a very dispersed, quote unquote, people into a core constituency? Ramdev, Ravi Shankar, and Sadhguru all spoke in favor of populist policies such as demonetization, etc. And they endorsed the Sang version of history. A very good question, a very elaborate one.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Subir Sinha, for this comment. Of course, since this is speech, I mean, his tweets are addressed to also an external audience. He wants to legitimize himself as a respectable leader, and of course, we can read that as a reaction to his extremely negative image that led the US to prevent him from denying him visa after the 2002 pogroms, and these things are well known. Of course, this is why he is very inclined not to be populist on Twitter, because he knows that it's not only his fellow voters and citizens who look at those tweets. There are also a lot of international agencies and a more cosmopolitan audience from abroad that then find, oh, there is nothing to criticize about this person. He only talks about peace, about Gandhi, and about celebration. He's very respectable. He collaborates with other leaders. So this I think it's one of the grid of interpretation of why he doesn't use Twitter for populist for his populist narrative. Not only because the audience is elitist, but also because the audience is international and he want to make everyone forget about his past and his basically killing of Muslims.
Excellent. I don't think we have any more questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to take the prerogative unless there's anyone else. I mean, your talk is incredibly rich in terms of the data, in terms of the type of analysis you've done. If we zoom out for a moment, where then would you think, I mean, you've made a very convincing case that Twitter is maybe not the place to find Modi the populist. Where do you think we find it most? I mean, if you, for example, would compare Monkey Butts with his political speeches, either campaign speeches or normal, I mean, he has many speeches, right, outside of the campaigning period. The in-person speeches, which are so famous in India. Where would you find his most populist discourse, and how do you think that relates to your overall thesis?
Thank you for this great question. I think that his Monkey Butts are the epitome of his populist narrative, is implicit anti-elitism, as portraying himself as a man of the people, as a friend, as a Dibandhu, as a friend of the poor, and as someone that is trustable and closely related. Part of this is found in speeches also, to an extent. And if you look at the indicators, in many respects, his regular speeches and his Monkey Butt are really close. So I guess that to an extent, his speeches and his Monkey Butt form a more coherent, relatively coherent whole, while his statements, as well as his tweet, form another polarity, and the rest is in kind of in the middle. Interesting also are his books. Not only, I mean, of course, books that he has not written himself, but books that are authored, I mean, have his name on it. You have a children's book that are extremely close to his Monkey Butt, because one of the themes is helping of Monkey Butt is to help parents to handle their children and help them for exam, etc., etc. You also have poems, that talk about the everyday life, stencil in the kitchen, exaltation of landscape, of festivals, things that are mundane and anecdotal, but are purposively anecdotal to tap into the everyday life of the average rural India. So you can see here arc. Some of his books is Monkey Butt, and part of his speeches, I think, can be clubbed together, and on the other side, statements and his tweets can be on the other side.
And if I can just follow up a little bit, so
yeah, sure.
Those would be particularly populist also in terms of intimacy. But how do you measure disintermediation, which is kind of a separate dimension, isn't it? How did you, when you investigated this, how did you measure that, or how did you come at disintermediation?
Right. So disintermediation, one of the main things that I use is the use of pronouns I and you. So there is a literature, and for instance, there's Gary Pennebaker, who wrote quite a lot about the significance of pronouns. The idea that we, for instance, denotes hierarchy and coldness and distance, so in a form of institutional mediation, while I and you are much more warm and much more disintermediated. Of course, there are other things. There are other things such as the use of references to institutions, and in particular references to electoral processes. So the less you talk about institution, the less you talk about electoral processes, the more you are disintermediated. There's also other form of categories, in particular insight and assent. The more you discuss, the more you use assent and insight. I can give you examples of those. Just give me a second. Ascent, and insight. So insight will be related to thought process and dialogue, such as realize, question, infer. And assent will be agreement, compliance, mediation, such as all right, yes. This will be related to a form of mediation. So when you don't use those, then you are much more disintermediated. But it's mostly relying on these electoral processes, these institutions, reference to institution, and these INU, ascendant, insight, are more peripheral to it.
And that's, of course, found in the populist literature too, the degree to which leaders are disintermediated. We have a question from Manushka, who asks, is there any role of language on media? Is there any role of language on social media here, even with some of the largest users of social media platforms in India? The engagement is more cosmopolitan because there are not enough different languages or dialects online for him to tweet and engage in. That's an interesting question, because you hadn't really talked about the different languages that he tweets in. And then this goes for users as well. People don't engage as much in other languages as in English. Perhaps this shapes the discourse on social media. That's a great question.
Of course. If you look at the breakup between the material that is originally published in English and the material that is broadcasted in Hindi or other regional languages such as Gujarati, you will see clearly that Twitter is the platform in which it uses English the most. And this is a great point. This is not anecdotal. It's also part of this attempt to connect to a more international audience, to a more cosmopolitan audience, and hence a platform where the incentive of being populist are much less. Here, English encodes a more standing, more international standing, higher reputation, in an attempt to present himself as a world leader. Hence, yes. So the question of English is really much there. As when it comes to the scarcity of availability of regional languages, Modi has made a tremendous effort to translate whatever he says into a lot of regional languages. So for instance, if you go to narendramodi.in, you will see a lot of regional languages in which they are translated. The same for Man Ki Baat. You will find translation of his Man Ki Baat in around a dozen of regional languages. So he makes a kind of tremendous effort to reach out, in particular to language in South India, because he knows that there is a need to. There's an electoral deficit, except in Karnataka, and that there's a need to reach out more to South Indian states. So there are translations in Tamil, in Malayali, and other languages.
Great, thank you. I think we no longer have any questions in the Q&A, so I'm going to ask you finally, Jean-Thomas, to be a guru yourself and to look into the crystal ball. What is the outlook for Mr. Modi on social media, and how crucial will they be to his continuing success, also to bring in different groups that are necessary for him to maintain his electoral support? That's a very broad question, but I think it might be nice to have an outlook from you.
But it's a broad question, but it's not an easy one. If we look at stylistically, he's moved towards guruship. His beard is now long. He goes to meditate he pretends to go to meditate to a cave right after election, to portray himself as far away from the nitty-gritty of political life. This probably is a trajectory of a certain withdrawal from commenting on hot topics. refraining from engaging in actual current hot debates, in particular when it comes to bad news. So less and less he will say anything when there is a rape, when there is a caste-based violence. He is a champion of saying nothing. And I think that this procedure, this process accelerates. So it's less and less engaging on those issues in social media. When it comes to social media use, I think, to be honest, he doesn't need too much social media for himself. Of course, his ideology and the propaganda it vehiculates is going to thrive in social media even more. I suspect it's going to thrive even more when the BJP and Modi are going to start seeing the possibility of electoral defeat, as it is the case already at the regional level, and it's possibly going to happen in the future as anti-incumbency is going to raise and Modi not being eternal anyway. So aggressivity on social media is going to be tremendous. The violence is going to be more, but himself, as a person who has embraced Iranic populism, is going to be less and less inclined to intervene personally on social media. I guess he's going to focus on audio and visual mediums. This Amazon Prime thing, I think, is quite. Of course, there was the pandemic, which also might also explain that he's more and more inclined to talk on YouTube and streaming platforms. But I guess that he's more and more focusing on that. He knows that the social media, if we can consider it a social media platform, that is most popular in India is YouTube. YouTube is also being streamed by quite deprived sections of the population. Now that the price of internet access has dropped tremendously, and Geo has enabled access, whether we like it or not, to the first time digital users. Modi has sensed it and is more and more. I mean, during the pandemic, we saw him a lot on YouTube. So I guess he's going to focus on those platforms, and he's going to be less and less interested in platform like Twitter. But of course, as you say, it's quite an attempt to read into the crystal ball. So I hope it's not going to be contradicted by facts.
Very good. Jean-Thomas, you have a tremendous data set. We look forward to your many publications on this topic, and they will surely make a decisive contribution to scholarship in this area in the years to come. So thank you very much again. I clap, and maybe we will have some participant claps, but I look very much forward to seeing you here again when you can tell us about your ongoing research. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for moderating this.
Thank you both to our speakers and our audience for giving us your time and expertise today. And you'll receive a follow-up email in due course. And be sure to check out our website for our full webinar schedule for this term, including our next event this Friday, 15th of October at 12 o'clock UK time, where Professor Victor Meyer-Schonberger, one of the co-authors of the book Framers, Human Advantage in an Age of Technology and Turmoil, will be discussing the work with OII visiting policy fellow Ivana Bartoletti. Thank you again to everyone, and have a wonderful day.